Welcome to Tobi's Arts Performed podcast. On this platform, Tobi will engage with artists and performers about their passions and interests. My name is Anirrudha Das. I'm a producer of experimental and electronic music.
Hello everyone, I'm your host Tobi and welcome to the 26th episode. This week I talked to Anirrudha Das AKA Dr. Das in the second part of his interview, where we talk about what is Asian Dub Foundation, his solo projects, the importance of his collaborations and the political effect of dub noise and political frequencies. He also told me of a debut of his album and his new electronic solo project in Poplar London on the 31st of August, named Dhangsha, Bengali word for destruction. Also, his friend and collaborator from Dub Morphology will be doing a debut gig for Bantu on Friday the 24th of August.
So basically, I did a course to learn how to teach music workshops in 1990 to 91, and then I was taken on immediately as a tutor, working in various community settings across the board with various different sets of people, young people, adults, people with learning difficulties, people with physical disabilities, so right across the board, and different kinds of musics, whether it was more band based or whether it was electronic based. In fact, I was one of the first to be engaged in teaching electronic music.
Oh, okay.
All right, because it was relatively new, and all the tutors before that time had come from jazz and classical backgrounds. I was first almost non-musician, so to speak, a first generation of that. So I was only the second person to teach electronic sequenced sampling, drum machines, that kind of music. So anyway, one such workshop happened in the summer of '93, whereby I was working specifically with a group of young Asian musicians, and that's where I met Dida Zaman and also John Pandit, who became Pandit G, ADF's turntablist, and he was a youth worker. So he'd been youth worker, anti-racist worker, so he had been part of the organising of these workshops. And we just felt we had a lot in common in terms of things that we wanted to say, commentaries, political commentaries, and also in terms of our shared interest in similar musics, which was mostly dub and the emerging jungle music at the time. So so that's why the three of us said, let's just carry on working together and making sounds based at community music, to which I had 24-hour access and a space there, so we would just make sounds there. And that was the origin of ADF in '93.
I saw an interview with you where you said that the election of Derek Beacon happened around that time.
That's right.
I was sent to boarding school
Yeah.
for secondary school, so I didn't get a lot of the experiences that other people got, but I still experienced racism.
Right.
But that must have been pretty insane around that time.
Yeah, but I mean, I can't. Everyone's experiencing it in different ways according to where they might be living. All right. I mean, I think I was working out there. I think at that time I was living around East London. But, certain communities, like at that moment, Bangladeshi communities in Bethnal Green, East Ham, where East Ham was where Didar was from, the first rapper.
Oh, right, yeah.
And John Pandit lived in the King's Cross area, and he was actually part of various organisations monitoring racist activity and also monitoring police response or collusion.
Yeah.
All right. So we all had our different levels of experience, direct and indirect, and also the level to which we were observing things going on. So yeah, someone living in the heart of those communities, like the people we mentioned in a song called TH9, Tower Hamlets 9. They were young Bengali guys who were on a vigil outside Whitechapel Hospital, who were arrested for being on that vigil and protecting themselves against skinheads and police. And a vigil outside the hospital because I think it was Kudus Ali, was a young Bengali guy who had his head stamped on by skinheads and was therefore in hospital due to those injuries, due to that attack. There was many such incidents taking place, running battles between Utes and skinheads down Brick Lane, when it was a time that it was unsafe to go to places like Brick Lane because of attacks by fascists, racists, skinheads, and then police protecting them and arresting the people who were trying to defend themselves, So our work, or early music and lyrics, was all about documenting those scenarios and also trying to mobilize people to get up and do something about it. And the early ADF gigs, when back in the day our format was more like a sound system, it was 3 of us. Sometimes we'd get one extra person to help. It was quite fluid, and we'd play in wherever people offered us a gig. Like, could be a students' union here and there, and part of that was to motivate people to go out and vote again, and to vote this guy out off the council, which was successful. But we played a tiny little part in trying to say, look, just go out and do it, or go to this or that demonstration. Free Satpal Ram.
Satpal. Yeah.
That was quite a few years later. That's about 98 we did that. They were attacked by a group or other people in the restaurant who happened to be eating at the restaurant, who were just generally being abusive towards the people who ran the restaurant. You've come to have an Indian meal and then you're abusing the people. You're running. And when Satpal objected to what they were saying, they started on him, and he defended himself. And because one of his attackers died as a consequence of a wound he received, for which he refused medical help. Satpal went down. Ultimately, to cut a long story short, he was convicted of murder. And so
there was all sorts of terrible miscarriages in the whole investigation, wasn't there?
It was a whole catalogue of things that went wrong. And then his was one of in many cases, it was the vibe of the times.
Mm.
It was that general thing. It's the same as the TH9 thing in that you are the one being attacked. You are defending yourself, but you're the one who's ended up being charged with violent disorder, or in Satpal's case, he was charged with murder. It's utterly, utterly ridiculous. So his campaign approached us, or there was a friend of mine who knew the campaign, and she approached and said, "Can you do a song about it, about this situation, about this guy?" And that's how we got involved. So it was actually more than a song. It was actually quite a prolonged campaign.
Yeah.
And we even got other people like Primal Scream on board.
That was because of you guys?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then they got other people that they knew, because they were like, everybody loved Primal Scream.
Yeah.
Particularly at that moment. So everybody listened to them. They wouldn't listen to us.
Yeah.
And so it was an interesting time.
Mm.
But it also kind of demonstrated what you can possibly do with music, when everyone was saying, no, you can't do that with music, or you shouldn't.
For a long time, music has been able to do that.
It's always...
I mean, that's blues, that's jazz. Do you know what I mean? It
goes back thousands of years. The bard, the travelling minstrel.
Yeah.
Part of the repertoire is criticism of kings and government. Part of it is what I call alternative news broadcast. That, again, the notion, going back to the concept of where is the delineation between art and reality. One is one, you can use art as at least a reflection of what is going on in society, or the context in which you create the art or music is affected by society. So it's only in recent times, particularly in capitalist times, and particularly in the 21st century, that people have said, oh, music is specifically for, you create this 2 or 3 minute portion of sound which is there to be sold, all right, and it's there just to make people dance or to feel happy for the very self-same 2 or 3 minutes, and then that's its function. Next piece of music. We kind of challenging that notion, but it's not a notion we invented, nor Bob Dylan, nor Bob Marley, or anyone else who has supposedly been making political music. There shouldn't even be a term political music. It should just be music that, why should you limit your expression to notions of personal love? All right?
Yeah.
And why should love only be defined as love of a partner, and why not love of your community? That's the implication of what we were doing. The notions that we're challenging both directly and indirectly. Indirectly because we're just getting on and doing it, even though people say, no, you are not allowed to do that. You cannot do that. It is not done.
So from what I get from you and what I've read about you guys, you haven't gone for the overly commercial audience.
No, we never did, because that wasn't even an aim of what we were doing. We weren't even, when we started off, we weren't even trying to be a band in the first place.
Yeah.
Not even a sound system. We were simply engaged in expression. We all had our respective jobs and stuff. No, I mean, we had an EP come out, but we still didn't think, oh, it's going to be this long-term working band and we're going to be travelling around the world. We had no notion of that, at least to start off with. The objective wasn't about, we were expressing to an audience but it wasn't necessarily for that audience to buy anything that we might be selling. It was for the audience to hear what we had to say and then hopefully act upon it. And then 2 years in, we got Facts and Fictions. Even then, we still didn't think we're necessarily going to be a band. It was only when we were getting increasingly more gigs, and we realised, and community music also realised, that they're getting more work as musicians and playing at stuff, and maybe this is the moment for us to let them go, and that they should get management and, you know, push that side of things, because it looks like there's enough interest out there. And so that's when we, round about 96, you know, that was like 2-3 years into our existence. 2 years or a year since we'd got the classic 5 people of the depicted on the first album. And then maybe your question, your statement starts to have some significance in our thinking. But there's no... Our sound was so off kilter to what was out there, you know, right in the middle of the age of Britpop. You know, and the sound of that music, the cultural connotations of that music, we were completely at odds with that. You know, there's something that's looking back to this mythical heyday of Britain, economically and culturally, and we're someone looking at the present and also the future. You know, so the sound of what we were doing was futuristic. The instrumentation that we used, even when we used the same instruments as them, i.e. guitar and bass, we had a futuristic sound. You know, dub bass is mimicking sequenced electronic bass. All right, the sound of it, the vibe of it, the repetition of it. All right, Chandrasonic's guitar sounding like a laser, sounding like electricity and lightning. You know, sounding like glitches, etc. It's all referencing a possible future, whereas you got Britpop referencing a past that never actually really existed.
Oddly colonial, very
colonial. Yeah, of course it was. And so we're totally at odds with that. So right from the start, you know, you're not going to get the sales or whatever of Oasis or Blur or anything like that. So we weren't even trying to do that. What we've always ever done was try to be as good as the sound that is in our heads, and to try and reproduce that sound as faithfully and as effectively and as efficiently as possible. All right, that's what's important. You know, if we've decided on a certain combination of sounds and lyrics, how to record that in the best possible way, how to play in the best possible way. So we were very disciplined in our processes, in our practice. You know, sometimes I'd go into the studio and people had started a fresh piece of music rather than finishing what they had started the day before. And I said, what are you doing? You started a great piece of music yesterday. Develop that. Because you could start easily. It's so easy to start a great piece of music every day. All right? But that's no good. Develop and finish the work that you're doing already. You've got to be disciplined. Otherwise, you won't have a set of music to play people when you've got this gig. And, you know, lots of people coming to see you and they've paid money that they haven't got to come and see you. You're not going to serve them with scraps of sound that sound great but hasn't been developed. So you've got to be disciplined and arrange the music, organise the music, sort out your lyrics, practice. Practice both personally at home on your own, and then be ready for the collective rehearsal. You know, I had to sometimes push that work ethic, because some people had not been it was a mixed band. Not everyone was a musician, and that was part of why it was great. You know, it was about people with mixed abilities and mixed experience of musicianship and non-musicianship, which apply to absolutely every person in the band. Okay, different degrees of musical expertise and experience.
Yeah.
But because of the component in our psyche of non-musical experience, that's what brought some freshness in and innovations in, and liberation. All right, because you are not tied. You're not tied to the 12-bar blues. You are not tied to the role of the bass player and the drums as subservient to other things. All right, you're not tied to there must be a guitar solo.
Yeah.
You know, etc. So the non-musical aspects of our experience were as valuable as the musical aspects, because that enabled us to innovate, and also to innovate without fear of failure, without fear of conforming to what is supposedly normal. All right, and when that kind of situation arises, you're going to get pretty unusual, off the wall, and what I can honestly say I felt was innovative music. I don't necessarily feel that now about Asian dub. Okay,
Right.
Which is why I engage in other forms of music, because me personally, I need to be doing something and creating sounds and juxtapositions of sound that I have not made before. I need to be making unusual combinations of sound. Once I find those combinations, I'm happy to go with that for a while, until I think, okay, I need to experiment more and move on again.
What is Asian Dub Foundation now?
What is it now?
Yeah.
It's an established band in the region of 25 years old that has a reputation, not only for making conscious statements, both musically and lyrically, and integrally, those two, but it's also a band with an excellent reputation for delivering a really hard-hitting live show, which still I think is musically different to most of what is out there. I think it's still a relevant live show, but personally I would question whether we are hard-hitting musically in terms of innovation as we once were, and also politically as we once were. I'll tell you a band that is, for me, satisfying both of those, and it's 47 Soul. And 47 Soul is the band of 4 young people from the Palestinian diaspora who are really kicking it at the moment, and have been doing so actually for a while. They're based in London, but they're all of Palestinian origin. They've lived in different places, whether it's the States, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Jordan, I think, possibly Lebanon, but they're all of Palestinian, they're all from the diaspora. And their music is making a conscious statement about the general Palestinian situation, and showing affinity with people in people and communities in a similar state of being ejected from where their home is supposed to be. You know, in communities in a state of flux, and there's a lot of parallels with the early ADF. Okay. In fact, they're our friends, and they say we are one of their influences. But I think they've outgrown the influence. They're doing their, you know, there's so many parallels. That their usage of both traditional sounds and lyrics, as well as, you know, cutting edge technology. That principle of technology plus the latest technological sounds combined with using musical elements and instruments that are traditional to your culture, that collision is always going to produce something really fantastic. And also the fact that you're coming from a displaced community, that's going to impact on what you're going to talk about and what you're going to express. All right, and they're doing it in a really fantastic way. It's fantastic music, and it's great lyrics, great presentation. We met them for the first time 2 years ago when we played at Adelaide, Australia. Okay. Although Chandrasonic, our guitarist, had already been ranting about them for a good year before that, saying, I've seen them in a restaurant in London and they're wicked, and go and check them out.
Are there any other bands or movement that's going on that...
I hope there is, but I'm not really that aware.
I know it's not necessarily a movement, but I know that people look to grime music as very significant and very poignant, particularly in inner city areas. But myself, I don't see that there's any particular art form or music that has such an impact. I mean, actually, possibly performance art, particularly from the LGBT community, because a lot of people I've interviewed are from those communities. Okay. But other than that,
I think it's two things to say there. One, quite possibly stuff exists and we haven't yet come across those people, because a lot of people might argue, well, I haven't gone and seen, a lot of grime people might say, well, I haven't seen these LGBT acts, because they don't move it necessarily the same. And therefore, it doesn't mean something doesn't exist. All right, so it's a question of, have we had access to seeing or hearing these art forms? So I think that things exist and we haven't come across it yet. They might not have their Facebook page or their Instagram account, and also how our perception of what is important and not important. Something wicked might be going on in certain communities, geographic communities, even regions, parts of London or any other cities, which we haven't necessarily experienced yet.
At the Sound System Week, where I spoke to a few people from Europe, there's one particular person, Nadine, who's an Italian sound system operator, and she was saying that most of the people that do sound system in Italy they're white people, but they do it around squats, because a lot of these squats aren't just homes, they're community organisations.
That's right, yeah. We played at such a place.
Oh, okay.
Or such places.
Yeah.
We played at a particular ADF, that is a particular place in Milan, which was this squat community centre. Yeah. Liaising with local community, but also people living there that have come from different places, whether it's young white people who do not feel a part of mainstream society, and also migrant communities, and there's some linkage with a similar place just across town, so forging links, and then cultural level and also on practical level in terms of clothing, shelter, feeding people, all of those issues. See, so that's a case of things are happening, going on locally in local places. We don't necessarily know about things until respective people in their different communities happen to make a link or some kind of overlap between other communities or other kind of artistic communities, and in different places, like they might do that overlap or that connection digitally, which is more than likely, because I'm not physically always in somewhere like Milan, but that was a very interesting project that we saw, and it's actually, you think, okay, that's a great template for something that could possibly be happening in London, and maybe it is happening in certain places in London, but we don't necessarily know until we experience that.
A lot of what you do personally and with Asian Dub Foundation is very much to do with collaborations. What is it about the collaboration that is important?
Well, I mean, there's different kinds of collaborations. Some of those are more to do with a record company might facilitate or enable or suggest that, and they've got those particular links. All right. Other stuff happens, like what I mentioned, the cross-cultural or the cross-media collaboration, like us engaging with a political campaign, a band engaging with a campaign or a community project or whatever. That's a collaboration. But taking the general principle of collaboration, it's so integral to how we happen to be as people. The very nature of Asian Dub Foundation with the original 5 people, you could call that some form of a collaboration, because we were all from disparate backgrounds. We all had musically, even culturally, within the Indian subcontinent, whether it's mixed Indian and English, mixed Indian, Irish, Bangladeshi, Indian, Punjabi, Hindu Bengali, Muslim Bengali, again, all these sub-communities that supposedly are supposedly different, supposedly some of them are not meant to get on together, etc. So, looking at it from that point of view, ADF is naturally a collaboration, and for us to engage with and overlap with other ideas from other people, it's just kind of normal, really. So you have the more obvious ones, which led to commercial releases and remixes and stuff, whether it's Primal Scream, whether it's various artists that I can't remember, established artists. And then you've got other less known projects whereby we are supplying beats and sounds or expertise, or even giving somebody some money to get on with a project, community based or a social project, when the days when we had some money. So it's just kind of normal. And then in my experience and work outside of Asian Dub, it's just full of collaborations. I've collaborated for more than 15 years with an organisation, or it's not even an organisation, it's a label, and it's kind of not even that, but it's an entity called Indigenous Resistance, which sort of highlights the struggles of indigenous people worldwide, all right? And it's not about making monies, but it's simply about getting, again, this interface between reality and art, getting spoken words from activists, poets, getting text, visual texts, sonic text, and juxtaposing that with music and musical ideas, which is often dub based or electronic dance music based, and then taking that back to particular communities and playing it to maybe young people in indigenous communities. So it's as much about going back to those places and encouraging those young people to engage in those processes. All right.
Right.
So it's recycling the music, so that can then lead to future kind of ideas. as much as it is about highlighting to the rest of the world, the non-indigenous communities, what is going on in those places all around the world.
Is it difficult to get people kind of to take notice?
Generally speaking, yeah. Knowing that that is the case, that it's just, in general, it's harder to get people engaged in things. It's one of the reasons that you use the format, the medium of music. We just had a meeting the other day which included the opera singer Gretchen.
Oh, okay.
So
you're going to be doing something
with her as well, and we've done so in the past. She's another kind of part of the wider Dub Morphology collective. And there was one project which we must have done in, I think, 2012, which was at the Tanks in Tate Modern. They often use that space for people to do sound orientated.
It's called the Tanks?
The Tanks, which is one of the spaces at the Tate Modern, which by the name of it you can hear that was where they had their fuel tanks at one time when it was a power station.
Right.
So it's this big space there. So people will go in and do, like, it is more to do with sound orientated projects. So we did one in there, and there was, so apart from Gary and Trevor, there was a whole crew of us, which various singers. So Gretchen represented quite classical and Renaissance and opera music, but being sung by a black person. And we had Sonia representing Indian classical and contemporary kind of sound, and we had a spoken word artist, poet, and then myself on bass and some electronic beats, and Ramjack was there doing electronic and experimental sounds. So another kind of collaboration, and then visual element to the project as well. So yeah, you know, collaborations is quite a big thing. It's the way we get kind of nourished, you know, how our normal diet is supplemented.
I wanted to ask about Fortress Europe. And I think we've kind of touched on a few of the elements that maybe have influenced that. What is that song about? Is it about a specific event?
Well, it originates from the recurrence of that phrase around about that time. So that would have been about 2001, 2002. We kept hearing that phrase, and, you know...
It was a phrase that you heard?
It was in general usage.
Oh, okay.
In governmental circles.
Really?
We need a Fortress Europe to keep out all these hordes of immigrants, hordes of migrants. We didn't invent that phrase. ADF didn't invent that phrase by any means. It was in general parlance on that political, governmental level. Yeah, you might not know because we're talking. That's now 18 years ago. So you were 18 years younger at the time. So you man.
I wasn't at all politically engaged back then.
Yeah. So that's why you might not have heard that phrase.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, Fortress.
I mean, that's
Europe, and that's the That's not your racist on the street.
Yeah,
that's the racists in parliaments and governments around Europe saying we need to tighten up our borders, or
But
the
is
collective border around what was.
See, I always remember. I mean, it's a common thing when there's an election, you blame the immigrants.
Always. It's probably gone on for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Goes back to Elizabethan times and earlier. The only immigrants I blame are the Anglo-Saxons. I think they should all go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a phrase in common usage. And what's going on in the song is actually Chandra Sonic, who wrote the lyrics and researched the lyrics, was he created a futuristic kind of scenario. That's why he talks about cybernetic dogs and kind of electronic fences and stuff. But some of those have become reality, you know, where you have a notion of governments employing private paid armies and security forces, all right, to control borders, or to control the incarceration of people, you know, private security firms. You know what though, just talking from an anarchist point of view, most of what you see around you, that on one hand say you're told this belongs to you, this is your town, this is your community and stuff. Actually, most of this stuff, what you see, does not belong to you. Most of it is private. We are sold on the idea that somehow it belongs to you and it's being taken over by immigrants and foreigners. Actually, the reality is some of that is true, yeah. But they're fucking rich bastards. Yeah. Property, Russian oligarchs and Middle Eastern. Yeah, that bit of it is actually true. All right. But we are being told that, oh no, we need to get Britain back from the poor immigrants who are coming over here because they're poor. All right.
Well, that's the other thing I've noticed, that in all the coffee shops and certain restaurants, the people that are serving us are Eastern Europeans.
Yeah. They are immigrants.
In the 50s it was kind of West Indians.
Yeah.
In the 60s and 70s more West Indians, but Indian people as well, Pakistanis. And then in the 80s and the 90s, more Eastern Europeans and that.
Yeah.
So it's just a different type of poor immigrant.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, the rich people here, or the people running these businesses, require these poor people because they can't get away with paying those rates of pay to the indigenous white communities or indigenous brown communities of this country. All right, so it's the whole thing is such a fucking con. Honestly. You know, and we need to...
ask you something?
Yeah.
What's going through your mind when you're taking those photographs?
What's going through my mind?
Yeah. What are you... Because you're connecting to something.
Yeah.
And it's inspiring you to take these photographs.
Yeah.
What is it that's...
It's a lot of things, and it relates to all the things that we've talked about today. Is that, for me, art processes, engagement in art is so important, I think, to people and society. And I have a love of those processes, and I have a love of the end products of those processes. And I'm simply wishing to be able to share that at a slightly later stage, whether it's today and sticking it up on Facebook or whatever, or just in general, to be able to share that with other people and to try and share the love or the enthusiasm that I feel for the process, for the art form, the final product, and also for who or what is depicted in that image, all right? And I often say this to people: I will not pull out a camera and take a picture of something or someone with whom I do not feel any connection. You know, and
is there a clear message in the photos that you take?
In the photos that I take, I would say, it sounds corny, but I'm trying to convey a love of people and a love of all that is good in society, the good stuff, the stuff that inspires you to do good things. That's it. It's a perpetuation of you see, I don't sit and analyse stuff.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You know.
I know. I'm getting. This is what I do on these.
Let me tell you, if you're some arsehole there, sat there, there's no way I'd be taking a picture of you. Unless I had a specific reason to put up a picture of, say, this is an arsehole, avoid at all costs. But if there is some form of engagement and some sort of ultimate furthering of the well-being of people and communities, then that little image is going to be a part of that process. Here is something we are doing. It's an expression that we need to make for our psychological well-being as well as economic. You know, we earn money from doing gigs, etc. That's our job. Luckily, we're very lucky to do that. But it's not an afterthought. It is the main thing that we are doing. But I ultimately don't see that it is separate from anything else. That goes right back to the beginning of our conversation. We were talking about a time where you perceived as a farmer, a carpenter or whatever, but you also sang, or you also wrote or created poetry, and people didn't differentiate really between what they did. Okay, maybe they're defined by economics, but they didn't separate the art off from the rest of their life. And I guess, if we're going to analyse it, is kind of my mentality, you know, to the point at which if I was somehow earning sufficient funds to live economically, to support the people that I care for, to survive and have enough food to eat. And honestly, I'm telling you, that's not guaranteed. Okay, it's still, but I would say I'm one of the lucky people. All right. But if those things are being satisfied, and then if I've got enough time left over to do art forms and artistic expression, you know, that's a super happy situation for me. And I say to people, do not compromise your art or your music in order to satisfy the market, okay? Because ultimately you will hate yourself. And I say to those people, ultimately you are going to, if for no other reason, you're going to hate yourself. You know, if you've compromised what is in your heart and in your mind simply because you need to earn monies or to earn love and likes from people, then you will not feel happy about yourself. You know, if you're not honest to yourself, how do you think you are possibly being honest to your audience Okay. And I said it's better that you find some means of survival, economic survival, and do not compromise your art form and leave it out there. And if you are being driven by your ego and your need to be famous and acknowledged, if that's the only thing that's driving you, well then, I'm not the person you should be engaging in a conversation. Good luck with that. Go and be a famous pop musician, or endeavour to try and do that. And it's very hard. But my personal preference is to be driven by the quality and the sentiment of the art. And if I can somehow get a means of economic survival, then I will use that approach. Someone hearing what I just said can say, oh yeah, it's all right for you to say, you're well known, you're in Asian dub, all right, you've got there, you're making money from what you love, and you're not compromising. Well, that's not entirely the case, actually, because that's my main source of income, all right.
Because you've got quite a following.
And we've got quite a following, but, different people within the group have got different aspirations and different objectives, all right? And what I was saying is the music of ADF doesn't convey everything that I wish to convey as a person, all right? It conveys enough for me to wish to remain there, beyond it being a source of income. So yeah, there's enough there, and there's enough interaction for me and interesting stuff going on. But for the stuff that doesn't satisfy me, that's why I go and do other stuff, which is, in terms of form, is different. And in terms of form, and maybe in terms of some political ideas, is different as well. The work I do with Dub Morphology, work I'm doing on my own, which isn't going to even be under the name of Dr. Das. I'm doing some out there experimental projects which you cannot squash into the format of Asian dub, which is now a very well established, very excellent, hard hitting live musical project. Established live band that delivers, and I hope still inspires people to go out and create for themselves, which is always, that keeps coming up in this conversation. Is that my need to encourage people to engage with the music of and art other than only simply as consumers. For people to realize their potential to be part of the conversation themselves rather than onlookers.
Listening to some of your music as Dr. Das on this, is it SoundCloud?
Yeah.
It seems to have a similar vein to Asian dub.
What a surprise.
Well, yeah, yeah. But it's not.
Maybe you look at it the other way around. Who has established the bass and drums template of ADF.
Yeah.
And I simply continue, but without some of the other stuff on top.
Yeah.
So people have heard some of the stuff that I did over the last 15 years, and they go, oh, it sounds like early ADF. And I go, what a surprise.
Yeah.
I've simply stripped it back down again.
Right.
To re-expose the underlying principles of melodic drums, of percussion and bass.
So going back to your early education in music.
Yeah, but I've done something that, with the dub noise stuff, that's very specific, in that I've generated experimental sound in a specific way, and that's by distorting primarily Indian and also Arabic percussion, and thereby releasing sounds and harmonics and what I call accidental melodies by by distorting and affecting these percussion sounds. And I'm just saying to people, just give it a go. Don't just distort guitars, as Jimi Hendrix pioneered. You can distort any sound that has got a melodic or a harmonic content, and you get all these interesting things that happen. You know, experiment and make experimental music into something you can dance to. So it's not just an intellectual experiment. It's like, this is dance music, but it's interesting and it's been made in a different way. All right, put your drum machines and your drum kit through distortion, and something interesting will happen, and you'll find that it'll affect you cerebrally and also physically. You know, try it. You know, that's part of the message there. But that's the literal stuff side of it. And then there's cultural connotations. You're distorting up tabla sounds. You're distorting up percussion sounds. Sounds that are from different non-white third world cultures. Okay? And in doing that, there's a metaphor going on there. It's a metaphor or metaphors, all right? It's either a message is subliminal or not so subliminal messages of anger, of militancy, of also saying we are not like animals in an open zoo for you to come and gawp at, which is a reference, what I'm talking about is tourism, all right? You know, and we're not exotic, all right? So fuck you and your tourist mentality. And it's come up recently, all right? Stuff we've known for years, that what's going on in Oxfam shouldn't be a revelation. It's been going on for years and years. You know, the arrogance of supposedly well-meaning white people, middle-class people, well-to-do people, all right? The arrogance, the racism, the sexism, the classism, okay, that has been going on for a long time. NGOs are basically, and I'm being a bit harsh, arguably, you know, job creation opportunities for those who already have monies in the first place.
Yeah.
Or young people who do their VCO, whatever, who've got the funds and whatever to go off and do good works for needy black and people of colour, black people and people of colour in poor third world countries that were made poor and third world in the first place through the systematic exploitation through empire of those countries, people and communities over the last several hundred years. All right, so that music that I've made over the last 15 years that has no lyrics in, all right, it's a fucking hippie's nightmare. All right, they're gonna go in, want, oh yeah, it's nice, some nice tabla music. That's oh yeah, that reminds me of my trip to Goa. All right, or my trip to Thailand or Bali, or oh yeah, going to Vietnam. Fuck that shit. I'm putting these through distortion. This is hardcore. All right, this is every bit as hardcore as Sepultura and Soulfly, and you know,
your tune, The Trial.
Yeah,
I know it's not in the same vein, but
yeah,
it took me straight back to Soulfly and Sepultura.
wicked,
Straight back.
wicked. I'm really happy to hear that. Yeah, it's not.
That's the music that I was listening to in the 90s.
Right.
I first got the Chaos AD when I was.
Well, I started listening.
93.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know the music of Sepultura, but I only know I have that connection because Max Cavalera left Sepultura to form Soulfly.
Yeah.
And apparently he loved ADF.
Really?
Yeah. And he came to see us when we played with the Beastie Boys in LA.
Oh, okay.
And our manager said, oh, he's really into your bass playing. And when I heard all that, I went out and bought Soulfly. and I heard, okay, he was in that band, and I can hear that he's trying to do something that is different. Again, innovation becomes ossified and calcified, and it becomes a genre. So innovation brought out that particular kind of punk music. Then it becomes a very particular genre with its conservatism of all genres. But he's trying to break out of that. He was bringing in the different lyrics. All right. He's bringing in Afro-Brazilian percussion. He's bringing in black people to work in a white band, or what has become that. All right. And then, of course, it makes sense. He's checking out ADF and he's checking out dub bass player, because I wasn't just playing dub. I was a dub bass player who had been listening to Bad Brains and listening to punk and jazz, you know. So he's hearing that in the bass. You know, it's dub, but it's also very, very fast. All right. And Basement 5, you know, so he's hearing the punk. So I listened definitely listen to that music. So it's interesting what you say about the trial, because it is different in that there's no bass line. And it's the phase that I'm moving into now, which is my identity for the last 20 years has been as a bass player, and as a particularly melodic dub bass player. And now I've started to write music, which you will have heard of my contribution to Dub Morphology. And it's not about writing a bass line necessarily anymore. I'm still using heavy frequencies and I'm still using noise, but the phase I'm in at the moment, and which is exciting me right now, is that I've kind of liberated myself from myself. Dr. Das, the bass player. That's why I'm going to drop the name Dr. Das.
Oh, okay.
For the new project.
Yeah.
I've got a new name on its way, which is Dhangsha, which is Bengali for destruction. And, you know, I'm liberating myself from the software, again, which has been my mode of composition for the last 15 years, both with ADF and with Dr. Das. And I'm buying hardware pieces of kit, sampling drum machines, noise machines, guitar effects pedals like this Rat. I love this. That was this little machine on its own, single-handedly, is the origin of dub noise, because I would put my sample tablas from my little sampler through the Rat distortion pedal.
Yeah.
It's a mental sound. You know, it's the sound of the speakers fucking up, which is a metaphor for the destruction of Babylon. Okay, and that's what I'm saying when I said there's this music, the dub noise stuff, it's without text, it's without lyrics for the most part, and it's still, for me, it has political intent or implications. You know, you can be there on the dance floor, and what I'm doing is, I'm trying to encourage people. I'm being non-prescriptive, okay? Lyrics are more prescriptive, okay? Lyrics are directing you through words to a certain idea. What I'm trying to do through frequency is, that's why I said that Dub Morphology, these are political frequencies.
Yeah, there was someone that asked the question and you said this is political. Yeah, these are political frequencies, and because of the feedback as well we got from Michael Macmillan, who was there, who was emceeing that session, the idea is I want people to imagine for themselves and to visualize for themselves. Okay, and again, that goes straight back to everything that I've been saying, is that there's always the idea with whatever I do, musically, photography, abstract music, or whether it's music with lyrics, it's all about
trying to encourage people to engage in the conversation for themselves and to research for themselves. I'm still doing it with abstract sound. Is visualize for yourself what could this scenario mean. You don't have to care about what I'm trying to convey. All right, what image does that bring to you? What journey does that take you on? What does it make you wish to do? Or does it make you wish to go out and write something? You know, or to paint something, or to take a picture. And that's what interests me, is the perpetuation of thinking and art, and the perpetuation of action. So it becomes this loop in which more and more people are engaged, rather than to delegate to other people. Take responsibility for your actions. Don't just delegate to politicians and then complain about politicians. All right. Get involved yourself at whatever level, and also endeavour to create your own art forms. You know, that all of those themes are always there in whatever work that I'm engaged with. Future of Asian dub, I really don't know. That's a good question. We ask ourselves that all the time.
I thought it was interesting that you said that Asian dub is giving you enough to keep you involved, but that you're engaging with other projects to sustain you creatively.
Yeah, to nourish me creatively.
Yeah.
All right. When you have a project like ADF, it's inevitable that it's going to develop into a certain style and a certain way of doing things. Okay? Therefore, you have bands that go on for 20, 30, 40 years, and they have pretty much part of their existence is that they satisfy a certain commodity. You know, that's why you've got a similar audience, albeit going through different generations, who buy their particular stuff or come to their particular shows. All right. And so, you know, without a doubt, ADF is to a degree like that. It's become this established, oh, that's that political band, or that's the band that does jungle drum and bass, live jungle. All right. And that is a part of the ongoing appeal for many people. But on a personal level, I have a need to engage in different forms of music. Also, some of the things we haven't actually discussed or touched upon is like, you know, there's not necessarily a uniform attitude to politics within ADF. At a certain point, we had this thing that was very much of the time engaged in very hardcore attitude of anti-racism. Okay, but there's more to our existence than can be defined by an adherence to simply anti-racism or even our Asianism. You know, Asian Dub Foundation has kind of outgrown the original significance of the name. As Asian Dub Foundation has other significances that are beyond us simply, oh, we're 5 or however many Asian guys, and actually we're not even all Asian now. And
oddly, I think that's one of the things that stopped me engaging with Asian Dub Foundation.
Right.
Being brought up as the son of a Guyanese man,
yeah,
with mostly white working class friends,
yeah,
some of them quite racist.
Right.
As well. I didn't see myself as, even though I was experiencing racism, I didn't see myself as Asian.
Right.
But it's really weird. The last few years, I'm getting darker and darker. Like, not literally, but psychologically. And it's a bit of a shock. It's very strange. And especially the more I'm learning
Okay.
I'm not academically minded. I don't know really why I'm doing a master's, but
Right.
I'm learning a lot from doing it,
Right.
and it's quite scary.
Yes, it is scary. It can be painful. It's definitely scary, but enjoy that ride. If it's scary, then treat it as a ghost train. Exhilarating, but scary. Unsavory shit comes up, but deal with it, incorporate that knowledge, and then do something good with it. Don't be afraid of that. You know, because we've all moved on beyond our need to only express our Asianness, all right? If indeed we ever were only like that, because there's so many other aspects of our
Well, I
life.
think what you were saying about the influence to your music,
Yeah.
like your early education in Indian music, that's influenced your bass playing and
Yeah.
your general music production.
Yeah.
I think that kind of encapsulates who you are as a British Asian man, because you're not just someone from the Indian diaspora who's reproducing Asian music and Asian culture. You're reproducing something that's influenced and principled by your family culture, but also incorporating something very British as well.
Yeah. But there we have to actually question the actual very, very nature of culture itself, because we're talking in terms of disparate masses of different cultures, and the actual nature of culture itself, that it should be considered to be something that's ongoing, fluid, in a state of constant flux, and that is the history of the world. Okay, because otherwise, if that wasn't the case, all cultures would have grown up ready-made in Africa 40,000 years ago and then exported to the different parts of the world. It didn't happen like that. You know, all culture is a culmination of people's experiences and what they remember of their experiences, and that becomes traditions and whatever. And so all of this process of the last 20, 30, 35 years has got me to question that actual very nature of what is cultural experience, and to realise that not to divide people off in the long term in relation into compartments based upon their perceived ethnicity, which is a kind of literal manifestation of their culture. You know, we automatically make all these associations with people based upon what we physically see of that person in front of us. For me personally, the biggest conflict in society is economic. All right, that's my personal take. All right, whether people agree or not. All right, it's class war. All right, and the way to stop people talking about that and engaging in that is to say, no, you are in shit and you are unemployed or you are homeless because of this brown-skinned person or this Polish person. Okay, that's why. All right, if you can maintain that illusion, because it is an illusion, if you can maintain that, if you can say, oh, it's because of Muslims or it's because of ISIS, you know, ISIS, who are being supplied by Saudis, who are the biggest fucking recipients of British arms, you know, go and fucking analyse the situation before you call anybody with brown skin ISIS.
Yeah.
All right? Fucking analyse it.
Listening back to this part of his interview, I'm reminded of how engaged and passionate he is with politics, culture and racism. I went to see Asian Dub Foundation at the Garage in London, and their live music set was every bit as visceral and hard-hitting as Aniruddha's interview. Next week, the following interview will be with a friend of mine called Samaya. Who is an Iranian woman brought up in London from about the age of 10. Her music is a fusion of jazz, Iranian percussion and also spoken word.